Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to the PSHE Association's first ever webinar. Today we're going to be talking about support for remote learning in PSHE education. I know that lots of you might be in really different places with this, but thank you so much for joining us and we're really excited to take you through this session this morning. My name is Jenny Fox and I'm the Senior Subject Specialist at the PSHE Association. So we realise this is quite an unsettling time for schools, and obviously we're in a kind of really unprecedented situation at the moment. So the first thing we wanted to do is just take a little poll to find out how you're feeling. I'm sure that each of your schools is maybe dealing with slightly different challenges. You've had to prepare lots of materials very, very quickly in the light of some government announcements over the first week or so. Okay, so here we go. So the things that we're going to cover in this webinar, first of all, supporting pupils to learn at home in a sustainable way. Tips for managing wellbeing during isolation. I think that's really important both for staff and for pupils at the moment. And then letting you know about some of the ongoing support for PSHE leads working from home that we're offering in the coming weeks and months. In terms of thinking particularly about PSHE topics that are suitable for home learning, I know lots of you are probably putting together some home learning packs or materials for pupils to use at home at the moment. And we think it's important to focus on topics which are going to be safe and effective for pupils to learn at home, because not all PSHE lends itself to remote or independent learning. So we've been having a think in the PSHE Association team and put together a few suggestions of topics that we think would be really beneficial at the moment. So starting with strategies for preventing infection, talking about kind of good hygiene, hand washing, following current government guidance, all of that kind of thing. Equally, we think ways for promoting positive mental health and emotional well-being, thinking about some of those strategies would be really helpful at the moment, and giving pupils some tools to equip them to feel better while they're in isolation at home. Sleep and good sleep habits. We're currently putting together some remote learning packs, and one developed from our sleep factor lessons, which will focus on good sleep habits, is going to be uploaded very soon to the website. Equally, something around balancing time online with other activities. It's likely that pupils are going to be spending much more time online at the moment than they otherwise would. So kind of reminding them about the importance of keeping that balance through some PSHE learning would be really important. And sort of related to that is also about managing friendships online and on social media. Without the face-to-face contact and being able to kind of regularly check in with people at school, it's even more important now that pupils have got those strategies in place to keep themselves safe and to communicate in a safe and effective way with their friends while they're on social media. Maintaining healthy eating habits and physical activity, particularly thinking perhaps about how we can adapt that for the current environment and how we can do physical activity in the home. Perhaps some study and learning skills, so helping them to develop their independent learning skills and ways that school can support them to do that while they're at home. We also think careers education is probably quite a safe topic to start pupils thinking about. It's really nice for them to have something positive to think about in the future, to set their aspirations and goals while they're perhaps in this state of a little bit of uncertainty. And shared responsibilities in caring for each other, we think, could tie in really nicely. As I'm sure you're probably already aware, or you've already been thinking about as you've been preparing these home learning packs, there are also many topics in PSHE education which are very complex and sometimes very sensitive for individual pupils, and therefore might not be appropriate for home learning or could be particularly risky for young people doing this at home. So obviously we know that generally PSHE requires discussions which are facilitated by a teacher, where they've got a safe classroom environment and they're surrounded by their peers, so there's a little bit of more distance, or they're sort of removed from the topic a bit more. We're also particularly concerned about potentially asking pupils to go away and research for lots of other subjects. English, history, geography, online research can be brilliant, but we're very conscious that with PSHE topics, it might lead young people to websites that are either unreliable and don't have very good information, or that could even be quite harmful or upsetting for pupils. So we would say there's a definite set of activities or topics that we would not want pupils learning at home. So the top one of those being unhealthy coping strategies, thinking about eating disorders or self-harm, is highly likely to be quite distressing for pupils at home and potentially unsafe. It might even lead them to websites that are sort of pro-ana, websites that are promoting types of eating disorder or self-harm. So we would definitely say avoid that, because it could be very dangerous. Equally, other mental health issues, so asking them to think about anxiety, depression, or other kind of common issues is likely to be very risky or quite upsetting for pupils at this current time. Equally, abusive relationships and exploitation are probably not a safe topic for them to be talking or thinking about at home, particularly for our pupils who may have extra vulnerabilities in that area or who may have already been affected by concerns like this. And for the same reason, FGM and forced marriage, we think these are topics that should definitely be avoided at home. I think that probably is all quite straightforward, but if anyone's got any questions about that or anything they'd like to sort of challenge around that, do please add comments in the chat or any other sort of reflections that you have about those topics. Okay, so we're going to do our first kind of activity now. This activity should take us about 5 minutes, and this is just to help you think about the types of lessons that might be suitable and the types of topics that might be suitable for pupils to look at home. So we know there are lots of quality assured resources out there which might be fantastic in a classroom environment, but not all of them will translate to home learning in quite the same way. So in the downloaded zip folder that you had earlier, if you could open document 1, there are separate documents whether you are a primary specialist or a secondary specialist, and these contain learning summaries, just 3 little different lesson summaries, and I'd like you to think about whether these lessons would be suitable for home learning. So 3 questions to help you. Might the topic be difficult for some pupils to discuss or learn about at home? Will this encourage or make it more likely that a pupil will go to an inappropriate or potentially harmful website as a result of the topic? And might it potentially re-traumatise or cause distress or anxiety to pupils? So we're going to give you 5 minutes now to just open up those lesson summaries, have a read through and have a little think about these questions. And then we're going to ask you to take a poll to sort of give us your feedback in about 5 minutes' time. Okay, it looks like most of us have had a chance to read through those lesson summaries now and have a little think. So I'm just going to pop a quick poll up to capture your opinions about whether you think these topics would be suitable for home learning or not. So just give me a moment to get those up. Okay, so the survey should be available to you now. Feel free to just pop in whether you think it would be safe or whether it would need adaptations or not safe at all for lesson 1, 2 and 3. And then do remember to keep scrolling down to the bottom to hit submit. Okay, so I'll just end voting now, so you should be able to see the results. Thanks so much, everybody, for taking part in that activity. So for lesson summary 1, most of us made the choice that we think maybe it's not safe for home learning. That's both for primary and for secondary. Let's have a look at lesson summary 2. If I can just yep, so most of us there saying we think this is a safe topic for home learning, very nice. And a little bit of mixed feelings about lesson summary 3. Some of us saying we think it's safe, some of us saying it might not be, and some of us, but the majority of us thinking it probably could be with some minor adaptations. So let's just go back to our PowerPoint now. Fantastic. Yeah, so for the first lesson summary, in primary it was a lesson summary about bullying, and in secondary it was a lesson summary about sexting. These are very likely to have affected at least some of our pupils at one point in their lives, whether it's being asked for a request or whether having experienced it or witnessed it or knowing about a friend who's been through it. So therefore it's likely to be a bit more personal and quite difficult for them to manage. Might be difficult for them to have open and discussions with their parents about these particular topics, and it's potentially likely to lead to some unsafe research online. So completely agree with lots of you there saying it's probably not a safe topic for home learning. Equally with the second one, we were looking at sleep and I think dental health. So a safe topic that could be very well supported by parents, I think, in both cases, probably particularly helpful in the current situation, particularly for secondary. And it's also an aspect of health that we feel could be kind of successfully managed at the moment. With the third lesson summary, this was about kind of economic well-being, which is one that we've been sort of encouraged to think about in terms of including in home learning packs. And it's one that we've been very much debating as a team back in the office. While in many cases economic well-being is often thought of as quite a safe topic and slightly less sensitive, we are a little bit concerned that at the moment there might be some risks if parents are particularly worried about money due to the coronavirus restrictions. So, for example, people who may be out of work at the moment or be kind of concerned about debt or money. So while it might be a sensitive topic for some young people, it kind of could be quite potentially a bit risky for them to have those conversations with people, with their parents. So particularly if they're sort of nervous about their parents and how they're sort of managing their situation at the moment, or it's been a discussion in the family. So not a complete no-no, but definitely something to maybe reflect on and think about, is this the right moment or the right time to be asking pupils to think about this topic? And so long as we're kind of, again, focusing on the sort of positive spectrum of economic well-being rather than sort of the worries associated with debt, for example. Okay, one of the other things we wanted to do was also look at a lesson and how we might edit it for home learning. So you might know that Public Health England have a whole scheme called Rise Above, where they are regularly creating lots of new content, lots of new lesson plans, which we quality assure and which are kind of recommended on our site. We've been having a think about these, and we think lots of them could be quite useful for home learning, but the lesson plan itself at the moment is obviously intended for work in a classroom. So what we'd like to do this time is just think about how we might change or adapt this lesson plan so that it was suitable for a pupil to use by themselves at home. So again, 3 kind of key questions to have a think about. Do any of the activities need to be adapted? So for example, group activities or discussion activities might need to be amended slightly. Do we think pupils could manage this work by themselves or in discussion with their parent or carer? And do we think the instructions might need to be simplified or stripped back a little bit for sharing with pupils? So again, in the downloaded zip folder that you had earlier, there is a lesson plan. This is designed for Year 7 students, ideally. So hopefully it could also be adapted down for primary pupils. If you kind of, again, just have a read through the lesson plan for now and a think about it, after you've had a chance to look, I'm going to ask you to just give me one idea about something that you would change about the lesson to make it more suitable for home learning. So we'll have about 10 minutes to do this activity. Just to let you know, if you do want to use this lesson plan and adapt it for home learning, there's also an editable PowerPoint in the downloadable zip folder. So we'll have about 10 minutes to have a read through, get to know the lesson and think about what we might change. Hi everyone, it's lovely to see that you're coming up with so many ideas and kind of bouncing off each other in the chat. I completely agree. I think definitely thinking about ways to break this down and either simplify the activities, maybe get rid of ones that we feel are a little bit unnecessary, or divide it up into a series of lessons, particularly if we're thinking that students might only concentrate for sort of 20 or 30 minutes at a time on a particular bit of PSHE at the moment. This could definitely lend itself to a short series of lessons, absolutely. Really nice that you're already thinking about how to adapt the PowerPoint. I really like, there was a lovely idea I saw, sorry, I can't remember who wrote it now, but something about adding a signposting slide at the beginning of the lesson as well as at the end, just to remind pupils that there are kind of places they can access help as they're working through the lesson. I think that's a really great idea. I also really like that lots of you are thinking about creative ways to get pupils still having open discussions. So whether you're using kind of technologies like Zoom at the moment, which is a sort of video chatting app, if you're not familiar with it, it's free to use and pupils can kind of connect on that. or if you've got something like Microsoft Teams or a online forum where pupils can add ideas, that's a really great way to still get them connecting together with their learning. Lots of us really liking the mood diary. I completely agree. I think that's a really nice thing for them to reflect on and use in the coming weeks, and could be a really helpful skill for them to develop over time at the moment. I see a few more of us are typing, so that's fine. Do please go ahead and keep adding ideas. I think you're right that actually a lot of it is quite discussion based. So there might be ways that we need to redirect some of those activities to be either written or to have a discussion with somebody in the family, or to direct them to an opportunity to discuss with other young people online. But you're right, it might maybe mean that it goes off into a few different tangents. So we might want to limit some of those possibilities. When I was having a look at this lesson, I thought there were lots of really nice things about it, but also some things that I'd probably remove in a home learning environment. So my perspective on it, not necessarily the same as anyone else's, and that's absolutely fine. But I think the stimulus works really well and pupils could still do. So there was a lovely mind map about the biggest influences on a person's well-being. I think they could definitely do this at the moment, and quite nice to kind of capture their thoughts about that at the start of the session. I'd probably leave aside core activity 1A. The students I'm thinking about wouldn't really need to spend a very long time talking about the definitions of social media and well-being. If we were doing it in class, I probably would have that discussion, but at home, I don't think it's necessary for them to focus on. So I'd probably then jump straight into watching the little video, which is quite nice and hopefully an engaging resource for pupils to use when they're at home, and to kind of straight away start filling in that table of thinking about the benefits of social media, some of the challenges, and some solutions to promote well-being. There's also a really lovely selection of well-being ideas in the lesson plan, which I would like pupils to kind of have a think about. When they're working on it from home, they could potentially rate those actions and think about ones that they would most like to try this week, or ones that they think would be most useful to them. It's possibly an opportunity for them to do a little bit more personal reflection, given that they're not in a sort of open classroom setting. I also really liked lots of the extended learning projects, as I think lots of you are picking up on in the chat. I think these are definitely things that pupils could work on by themselves. There's one that's a kind of open debate topic opportunity, which probably wouldn't work quite so well for home learning, but it could be something that pupils either discuss with their family or write a written response explaining their own personal view and why they think that. So just some ideas of ways to capture what pupils could do in this lesson. If you do have ways for pupils to share their learning with you, it might be lovely for them to kind of post bits of podcasts or blogs that they put together as a result of this lesson that could be shared with the rest of the student population. So that's just one idea of how you can adapt lessons for home learning. We are hoping to share some more guidance about this on our website soon, and we'll also be putting up our home learning packs as of next week. So do keep an eye out on the website for more resources coming your way in relation to that. So I'm going to move on now to talk about tips for managing wellbeing and isolation. It's probably worth saying at this point that I'm not a mental health expert, but we have been kind of doing a little bit of reading and thinking about this as a team, and sort of picking up just a couple of key tips and strategies that we think could be useful both for pupils and for staff. So I'll just quickly take you through those, and do drop me any comments in the chat. So first of all, I think we're all very keen to spend a lot of time looking at the news at the moment. We're probably spending more time on social media than we normally would be, but some of the advice that's been going around recently about this is that we may want to limit our time on social media, and particularly on news apps, if we're feeling this is increasing feelings of anxiety or worry. That's probably something just to remind pupils of, because they might find themselves logging onto Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or Instagram or whatever it is that they're using more frequently. And actually that can lead to a sort of very subtle build-up of feelings of anxiety or worry. So trying to remind them to limit that and to having kind of blocked out time for screen time. Equally, allocating a set time to look at the news each day rather than feeling like you've got to watch every single update. And as we would with other sort of digital literacy topics, referring them to reliable sources. So reminding them to try to look on the NHS or to government websites rather than trusting everything that they see that's being shared on social media, because again, that can lead to increased feelings of nervousness or anxiety around the issue. We spoke earlier about creating a daily timetable and routine, and this can be really grounding and really supportive to help people feel that they're keeping a kind of sense of normalcy, but equally it can lead to a sort of boredom sitting in. So a kind of a mix between having a daily routine, but also trying to do new things. So whether that's using the time at home to learn a new hobby, or catch up on things that we feel that we don't normally have time for, having that sense of something new and exciting and different to do can help pupils to kind of feel focused during this time. And of course, staying connected with people. This is really challenging at the moment while we are all kind of isolated at home, but reminding them to try and keep in contact with their friends, particularly perhaps their friends who are maybe a little bit further on the outside periphery of their friendship groups. So making sure that they check in with people and make sure that they're feeling okay. That might also be about keeping in contact with elderly relatives or with other members of their family who don't live in their home, and trying to use a variety of different ways to keep in contact with them. So messaging, but also phone and video calls, so that we're building that kind of additional connection. And as we mentioned earlier, keeping to those regular sleep patterns and making sure that we get plenty of rest at home too, and we're not sort of staying up late looking at social media. So with that in mind, again, wanted to share just a couple of wellbeing learning activities that we could ask our pupils to do that we feel are sort of quite cross-phase suitable. So these are just a few kind of ideas that we came up with in the team, but you may also have more, so please do feel free to add them into the chat. So for example, asking pupils to create a leaflet or a poster about tips to promote wellbeing, particularly at the moment. Asking them to create a list and try out some ideas of indoor exercise at home. I've seen lots of adverts for PE with Joe on YouTube, but also there's lots of other things that they could be trying in terms of indoor exercise at home. So putting together a list and trying out some of those would be great. Perhaps also asking them what they might say to reassure a friend who was feeling worried. This could be a sort of written activity, so writing a letter or a blog post or a script between them and a friend, of thinking, what can I say to help them feel better? Putting students in that role of being the advisor and this person offering the support can help them to practice some of the things that they might even say to themselves or say to other family members and friends. And then again, asking them to try out and perhaps review a range of wellbeing activities. So they might be trying yoga for the first time, or meditation, or some of those indoor exercise activities, whatever is kind of helping them to feel better at the moment, writing a short review, whether it's something new that they've tried, how they felt about it. Those kind of things can really help them to ground themselves in wellbeing strategies that work for them. If anyone's got any other suggestions, do drop them into the chat. Looks like a couple of us typing. A creative way of showing me how they're going to demonstrate resilience. That's a lovely idea. Learning to bake, teaching their brothers to dance. Oh, that sounds really nice. Again, very creative, really good for them to demonstrate skills in the real world, kind of in practice. So thanks for those ideas. That's great. Are there whole school approaches to supporting wellbeing at the moment, or is it sitting mostly with PSHE? Yeah, good question, Anne. It'd be interesting. Oh, the rainbows in the windows. Yes, I saw this post on social media. So if no one's seen this, it was about kind of taking young people out with their families to sort of walk around the local streets and see if anyone's put rainbows in their windows. So lots of people were creating kind of artistic pieces of putting rainbows in their windows, kind of like a whole spot the difference type thing to do with younger children. That's really lovely. 7/8 have done a time capsule project and sent some fab photos and videos. That's really nice. I'm just going to move to the next slide while you're all typing. Oh yeah, ask them to include things from a list, like a letter to their future self. That's a really nice idea. Set daily tasks. Oh, current news headlines, photos, pictures. Could go in the time capsule as well. Really lovely ideas. I'll let you guys keep carry on typing and sharing ideas as I just take us on to the next slide. I hope that's okay. I'm just slightly aware of the time. We've already talked a little bit about signposting support for young people at the moment. Definitely, we think it's quite important to try to create maybe a list of reliable and age-appropriate websites to support them at the moment. You've probably already seen some of these going around, but I will just share my screen with you for a moment to show you some of the ones that we picked up on. Childline have got a brilliant section called Worries About the World, where you can find advice, and in particular, they've got a section on Corona at the moment. as do Young Minds have put together a sort of blog article about what to do if you're anxious about coronavirus. So these might be nice ones to highlight to pupils. Let me just share my screen with you. So this is the coronavirus page on Childline's website. So what is it? Help if you're worried, coping if you're staying at home, and if you're feeling unwell. So again, just a nice child-friendly approach to kind of reading about this. And then equally, I'll just show you the Young Minds website as well, what to do if you're anxious about coronavirus. You can see there's kind of lots of sections that they can go through about arming themselves with the facts and planning their time, etc. Okay, let me just come back to my PowerPoint. You might also know that there's several meditation and wellbeing apps that are designed for young people. So lots of them are currently offering free materials. You might already be familiar with apps like Calm or Headspace. They may not be for everybody, but you might want to direct pupils to some of those. They've got some nice kind of relaxing things just before bedtime, or some sort of short meditations or kind of relaxing stories, those kinds of things that can support pupils. Struggling with lessons for Key Stage 5. Thank you for that comment. We'll have a little think about that, and I will sort of get back to you on it in a few moments' time. I have to say, at the moment, most of our home learning packs we're designing specifically for Key Stage 3 and 4, but we can definitely have a think about what might support Key Stage 5 students as well. So thanks for sharing that. Worried about directing pupils online. Yeah, I think we wouldn't want them to just go away and kind of randomly Google websites, but I think if there are particular ones that we're aware of that we think could be supportive, I think it might be all right to have those links, but that will slightly depend on your own school policy. So thanks for raising that point. To finish us off, I just wanted to talk a little bit about support for PSHE leads who are working from home at the moment, which I assume is most of you. I know that lots of you have also got to go into school at certain points, but you might find yourself with additional time on your hands at the moment. As far as we know, the statutory changes to relationships, sex and health education are still coming into place as of September 2020. We know that you're probably already very far ahead in terms of working your way through preparing for this, but this is a really good time to seize the opportunity if there are any last bits you need to do to get done before that happens. So again, I just wanted to kind of highlight one of our pages on the website. We've got a page called Tools for the Job, which puts together lots of the core materials that you will need, things like, for example, writing a RSE policy if you haven't done that yet, or updating it. There's lots of ideas for curriculum planning and how to make sure you're building in all of those new statutory changes, ideas for pupil voice, which you could do sort of in September or October when pupils are back in school. So I'm just going to quickly share my screen again so that you can see that page if you're not familiar with it. So this is our Tools for the Job page. I'm sure lots of you are already familiar with our new programme of study, which we launched in January. This makes sure that all of our learning opportunities are kind of closely tied in with the statutory guidance from the DfE. We've also just put out our programme builders for PSHE education. These give you sort of 5 different models of a whole PSHE programme, divided by half term and by year group. So there's some for primary, some for secondary, and then one that's a cross-phase model as well. So if you haven't seen those yet, do have a look, because they help to break down different learning objectives for each half term and link to quality assured resources. I'm just going to quickly show you the secondary version, but lots of the resources are similar for primary. So here's our roadmap to statutory RSE, which you might already be familiar with, and our leads pack, which has lots of tools for you. There are some statutory explainer slides which just kind of give an overview of what's expected of schools. If you haven't had an opportunity to meet with your SLT or your school governors, this could be a really quick and easy way to share some kind of key information with them while you're working remotely. As mentioned, there's tips for writing your RSE policy and for supporting parental engagement. Obviously, that's going to be particularly challenging at the moment, but there might be things that you can plan to put in place for September or October, or the first sort of term that you're back. You might also know that we've also got lots of lesson plans available for RSE. So we've got a whole scheme of work that we wrote with Medway that goes from Key Stage 1 to 3, lots of lesson plans and PowerPoints on there. We've recently launched Family Life, which explores kind of marriage and parenting, which was a particular aspect of the DfE's guidance that we felt was a bit of a gap in our resources. You might already have seen the NSPCC's Making Sense of Relationships and the BBFC's looking at sex relationships and BBFC age ratings. So it's looking at kind of sex and relationships and how they're portrayed in the media. So do have a look through this page if you're not familiar with it, or you would like to kind of get a few more ideas about how to prepare for statutory RSE. I also just wanted to take this moment to show you our coronavirus hub, which is a new tab on the website, which we added last week. This is very much in its infancy, so it's only just appeared. We've started with our first 2 guidance documents, so a guide to teaching PSHE remotely, which has covered some of the things that we've spoken about in today's webinar in a bit more detail, and then also advice on addressing coronavirus, so talking to young people. This could be kind of used for teachers who are still in school and still working with their vulnerable pupils or their key worker pupils. Equally, this could be sent out to parents. We will keep adding advice and guidance documents onto this part of the website, and we'll also be adding all of our home learning packs onto this part of the website, so do keep an eye out for those. Okay, I'm just going to end my sharing again so that we can come back to the PowerPoint. So that was just showing you the coronavirus hub, which has been added. And as I say, there's the guide to teaching PSHE remotely and talking to young people about coronavirus. The next thing that's going up as of Monday is a parent's guide to home education, because we know that lots of parents will be working with their pupils, particularly in primary school, to help them stay focused at the moment. So we've given a sort of guide to talking about PSHE at home. So with all of that in mind, we're kind of coming towards the end of the session now, and we just wanted to ask you again, we obviously really want to support you through what we know is going to be quite a challenging time in the coming weeks and months. And so we kind of love to know what materials would particularly support you at the moment. We've put out what we think will be sort of initially helpful, but it'd be great to get sort of your feedback. And also, we are hoping to run many more webinars like this. So again, we'd like to know what sort of topics you'd like webinars on. So I'm just going to put forward our final poll for you to complete with those 2 questions. Let me just find it for you. So you should have the new poll now. Again, there's just 2 questions. If you can fill those in and hit submit. If you're selecting other, it will be really helpful if you could pop into the comments what other things you'd like that we sort of haven't hit upon yet with the options. It looks like we've got almost everyone voted, so I'm going to end the voting in about 30 seconds. So if you haven't had a chance to submit your answers, then please do before I share them with everybody. Nice to see a few people typing in the comments. That's great. Okay, so I'm just going to end voting and share the results. Thanks so much for completing that. It's really helpful in terms of our ongoing package moving forward. Great to see that lots of you will be really keen to see more webinars on various PSHE topics, absolutely, and home learning packs. Yes, they seem to be the 2 most popular, and we completely understand why at the moment. A few of you asking for some more advice documents or one-to-one bespoke meetings, which we are also hoping to put in place very soon. Resources on bereavement. Unfortunately, staff and children may experience this over the coming weeks and months and would like to be able to support appropriately. Yeah, that's a really challenging one, Gemma. I think a really good point, and definitely one for us to think about as a team. To some extent, we'd find bereavement quite a challenging topic to teach at home, but equally we recognise it might be a very much a reality, sadly, for some families at the moment. So it's definitely something for us to think about. And in terms of our webinars, looks like a real range of topics, and we will try to put lots of these together in the coming weeks. So the most popular one at the moment looks like practical classroom activities for preparing for statutory RSE. Absolutely, we can start to think about that and prioritise that as one of the first ones that comes out. Some more support for PSHE leads and curriculum planning and using the programme builders. And a tour of quality assured resources. Good, so a nice spread there, and we can start to put those together. Just checking the comments again to see if anyone's got any other ideas. We have needed to deal with this in our school. I ran a pastoral group with a worker from Winston's Wish. Yeah, Winston's Wish is a really great charity that supports young people managing bereavement. So definitely look those up if you haven't heard of them before. Thanks for sharing that experience. I'm so sorry that you've already had to support young people with this. A one-page summary for head teachers about the importance of PSHE at this time. That's a really great idea, Jonathan. Yeah, we could definitely put that together reasonably quickly and have that up on the coronavirus hub. Maybe whole staff training where others can log in and watch a webinar. Yes, absolutely. This is our very first one, so we've limited the numbers to about 15 people. Our capacity for these are 25 at a time, but there's no reason why you couldn't, for example, log in as an individual and have the webinar broadcasted to a wider staff group if you can get them in the same room. Obviously, with social distancing at the moment, that is quite tricky, but there might be ways that we can work around this. We're also offering these webinars for free, so if you can't get access to one, you could kind of come back to another or have different staff members join in with different webinars. Okay, fantastic. Thank you very much. Do feel free to keep adding the comments. If I haven't been able to respond to everything that you've said, we will send around a kind of FAQs after today's webinar, kind of responding to your sort of ideas and suggestions. So if I haven't sort of verbally responded to your comment, please don't feel that we're ignoring you. I'm just watching them go quite quickly. It's nice to see so many of you adding ideas. That's kind of brought us to the end of our session now. I've noticed that we've just gone over the sort of hour that we allocated for this. I will open up question mode just for a couple of moments so that if anyone's got any direct questions that they'd like to ask before we finish today, then please do. But otherwise, just to say thank you so much for joining us. We've really appreciated your participation and enthusiasm. I hope it's been helpful, and do keep letting us know if there are more things that you need from us.